Here we are getting close to the end of day one. We're approaching session 4. After this, there'll be a Q&A. This is the US Biochar Initiative, Biochar Funding Opportunity with the USDA NRCS Code 336 and 808, the Soil Carbon Amendment. Next up, Michael Margo will give an overview of conservation practice standards. Then he'll go deep into the Soil Carbon Amendment Conservation Practice Standards 808 and 336. We need to thank our sponsors for making this program possible. Now, here we go with Michael. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome back from break. This is John Webster. I'm the Director of Communications for the US Biochar Initiative. Today, we have a deep dive into the NRCS Soil Carbon Amendment Practice Standard. We're looking at Code 336 and 808. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. The first half of our day was loaded with excellent questions from attendees and lots of great insight from the presenters. So right now what we're doing is we're going to get going with Michael Margo. He is the Acting National Soil Health Specialist. And Michael, take it away.
Okay, thank you, John. And hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. It's great to see so much interest and with NRCS and one of our new practice standards. Okay, I'm going to start off first 2 or 3 slides, just a little bit about the Soil Health Division. I've been acting as a National Soil Health Specialist since last July. So we support the NRCS mission by providing the best available soil health science, technology training, guidance, and technical resources to NRCS employees, customers, and partners in order to improve the health and function of our nation's living and life-giving soil. We amplify our NRCS's conservation planning and implementation efforts, and we add conservation and economic value to the farming and ranching enterprises of NRCS's customers through integration of soil health. The Soil Health Division focuses its soil health training and technical leadership efforts to help the agency provide comprehensive and effective support on the use of soil health assessments and the planning and implementation of soil health management systems on our nation's working lands, working in coordination with NRCS state and national entities. We have within the Soil Health Division, we have some focus areas of strategy, policy, and communications, assessing emerging soil health issues. We're looking at implementing strategies for priority needs and developing policies and guidelines like the Conservation Practice Standard 808 and other manuals and tech notes and tech fact sheets that would be available for technical service providers and employees. Another focus area is science and technology development and acquisition. We identify and communicate soil health research, technology development, transfer, implementation, and training needs. We evaluate new science, technology, and producer experience in implementing soil health management systems. And that science and technologies will help guide, the development of our conservation practice standard. We lead development of technical priorities for soil health focused conservation innovation grants, soil health demonstration trials and agreements, and lead technical oversight of projects. We assist states, Pacific Islands, and Caribbean areas with leading soil health related projects and demonstration projects or field trials. And all this technical support for NRCS voluntary conservation programs. We also focus on training, technical assistance, and technology transfer. Acquire, develop, evaluate, and disseminate new soil health technologies to solve natural resource problems and other technical issues in support of the field delivery system. We provide national leadership and consultative services for strategic management of soil health education, training, and technical assistance capacity of NRCS. and capacity building to the states and Pacific Islands and Caribbean areas to facilitate effective field office and partner use of soil health assessments and interpretive tools for management, planning, and implementation of soil health management systems. And within the soil health division, we have 14 regional soil health specialists that provide support to the states. And it's divided into the west and to the east. We have team leaders. We also have an urban focus area. The big bullseyes across are kind of our urban focus areas within the United States. We have an indigenous practices team, and there's the regional soil health specialists. Each regional soil health specialist provides support for a certain number of states within their area of responsibility. I'm based out of national headquarters with Amanda Branham, our director, and other support staff scattered throughout the country. Okay, so now with that, I'm going to go into definition of a practice standard, and it's a structural vegetative measure or management activity used to protect or reduce the degradation of soil, water, air, plant, animal, and energy resources. Matt has expanded and has talked about the resource concerns related to soil, water, air, and plant, animal, energy resources. We delivers technology based on allowable criteria to adapt the technology to the site. And there's approximately 164 current practices in our national handbook of conservation practices. There's some supporting materials that for states is some implementation requirements and the payment scenarios that we've been talking about that are associated with each practice standard. As Matt mentioned earlier, this year, you'll see two identities, same name, Soil Carbon Amendment, 808. The number 808 was assigned to the interim practice, which was created in 2018 for evaluation. That's basically how all new standards, permanent standards, pretty much are born. Basically, they are created based on a need. States, there's a few states that sponsor it for evaluation and refinement. So between 2018 and here up until recently, last year, there was a lot of internal reviews and comments, over 550. And when those were incorporated into an updated standard, it was sent out to the Federal Register last year. Where we received over 500 comments on the standard, and many great input and information from USBI, US Composting Council, and among many others. And all that information and scientific research and was all used for the development of this standard. And I definitely won't take credit for this development. This has been ongoing since 2018, and many of my predecessors, Brandon Smith, Rachel Seaman Barner, and many others who were working on these standards, and at the time, got it to where it is now, and so the 336 I did want to mention is the code for the permanent standard soil carbon amendment. It incorporates all the comments and reviews that were based out of the 808. So for this fiscal year 23, there are two standards available. There's payment scenarios, as Matt mentioned, are only associated with 808 for this fiscal year. And for fiscal year 24, the payment scenarios will be reevaluated, adjusted, and attached to 336. And every time you go into your state's field office technical guide, you will see only Soil Carbon Amendment 336 if they have adopted it. And you won't see 808. So this is the last year of seeing the 808 number. I know there's a lot of questions on related to which states have adopted the standard, and this year states, because 808 is that standard, there's only 808 payment scenarios, so states for fiscal year 23 are still adopting 808. But when this 808 and 336 is first released, the final standard was released in November 2022. It is a national standard, and states, if they choose to adopt it, work with develop their own standard, and that's why we point end users to their state field office technical guide to look at the Arizona 808 standard or Arizona 336 standard, because Arizona may add some additional considerations or restrictions based on local state policies related to amendments that a neighboring state may not have. So they use the national standard to kind of modify slightly, and there are restrictions. It can be changed drastically or anything, but it can be made slightly more restrictive based on local policies that and requirements that they need to adhere to. We have 28 states as of right now that have adopted the 808 standard. And I also mentioned that there are 10, I mentioned earlier that there are 10 payment scenarios associated with the Soil Carbon Amendment 808. Some are compost only, and in the mix of biochar and compost at different percentages. There's some payment scenarios for small areas, focused in the urban settings, but not all the states may choose not to adopt all payment scenarios. Some states do, and other states may just be focused on just biochar or just the biochar compost mixes. And so what do you do if your state is not listed here and you're a producer, a farmer, a rancher that's interested? As Matt mentioned, that shouldn't discourage you from still applying and contacting your local field office, because the demand at the local level will drive the incentive for the state to adopt. There's a process for that states need to overcome if they are not listed here, and there is an application that has come in that is looking for the adoption of looking for the application of Soil Carbon Amendment. But there are state technical advisory committees. The state conservationist is the chair of state technical advisory committees, and various states have meet at various times, whether some states meet quarterly, and state state technical advisory committees sometimes have a representative of a farmer or rancher organization having a seat on that committee. And if you're a member of that organization, that's a good opportunity to voice your interest in this new standard in the state, that it's something we would like to implement. Reaching out to reaching out to your state conservation is also another method of requesting to serve on the state technical advisory committee. And if you first can go to our NRCS website that we have shared in various slides. You can navigate to your state contact. Okay, and so going back to the actual practice standard itself, it has different sections: definition, purposes, conditions where the practice applies, just some general criteria, some additional criteria that may be specific for certain aspects, considerations, plans and specifications, and operation and maintenance. So I'll go through all these different sections for 336. So definition starts off with the definition: application of carbon-based amendments derived from plant materials or treated animal byproducts. And the purpose: it's use this practice to accomplish one or more of the following purposes: improve or maintain soil organic matter, sequester carbon and enhance soil carbon stocks, improve soil aggregate stability, and improve habitat for soil organisms. These purposes are tied to your our resource concerns. I briefly mentioned there was a question about range. This practice applies to areas of crop, pasture, range, forest, associated agricultural lands, developed land. Urban land is a modifier within developed land, which is small areas, and farmstead, where organic carbon amendment applications will improve soil conditions. Okay, then it starts off, and I'm just going down from the top of the standard down through it. The general criteria, which is applicable to all purposes. We want to plan and design and implement carbon amendment applications in compliance with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations. The owner or operator is responsible for securing all required permits or approvals and for applying the amendment in accordance with such laws and regulations. Evaluate, and is an important point I want to talk about, expand upon, is evaluating the site using appropriate planning criteria, assessment tools, or evaluation activities for the intended land use to determine where soil carbon amendment will achieve the intended purposes. And my next slide touches upon some things that Matt mentioned about evaluating resource concerns and testing, evaluating the site before applying any soil amendment. Test the soil prior to amendment application, use laboratories meeting current requirements and performance standards. Under the auspices of the Soil Society of America, or use an alternative state-approved certification program. And you did see this slide earlier. There are resources available to our conservation planners to help evaluate the resource concern. You have that important client input, planner observation, in-field soil health assessment worksheets, traditional soil tests, soil health testing, which is that SEMA 216, which it could be a comprehensive or a soil test looking for multiple soil health indicators, or you can have, if you're just interested in organic matter, you could just test for that. Russell 2 model, erosion tillage models, and that web soil survey interpretation that was mentioned. And then these are the resource concerns that the soil carbon amendment 336 focuses on addressing. Matt went through these earlier. Okay, we're still under the considerations. Follow land grant, university, or industry guidance to collect, prepare, store, and ship soil samples. This is continuation of when you're grabbing the samples to test of the soil. And ensure sampling protocol and lab soil test methods are the same as those required by state adapted conservation practice standards. And if you're implementing this standard alongside a nutrient management code 590 is another conservation practice standard, there are some soil test methods required there as well. And at a minimum, we want you to look at the soil pH, the soil texture, soil organic matter or soil organic carbon, extractable phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulfur, and magnesium, your CEC. You also want to be looking at other properties you may want to test for based on local conditions, your bulk density, aggregate stability, available water holding capacity, and some of the other elements. And this is some additional criteria for all amendments. Prior to application, document the physical and chemical analysis, the composition and properties of amendment per amendment category near the time of application. Current amendment analysis documentation shall be provided by the party that produces the amendment. So it's important the planner and the producer is applying the amendment, but we need to know all the chemical properties to match up with to meet the objectives of addressing the resource concerns based on what your original soil test of your site is telling you. You know, do you have a low pH? Do you have some? You want to make sure you're selecting whether it's biochar with a certain from a certain feedstock, or you want to make sure you're inoculating it with compost or other amendments to address any nutrient needs, and you want to make sure that it is part of a comprehensive nutrient management plan as well. You want to apply carbon amendments with minimal disturbance at a rate and time that will achieve the intended purpose. I know tomorrow we'll be discussing a lot on application rates and methodologies, and so look forward to that. Evaluating the landscape soil properties. Evaluate the landscape soil properties, amendment composition, plant nutrient needs, and application rate to see if nutrient management code 590 is needed to address nutrient related resource concerns. And do not apply any high salt materials where salinity is a concern. And then we have some conditions where we do not want to apply amendments, any amendments produced from crop residues that would otherwise provide soil protection and improve soil health, or from woody residue that is necessary to sustain forest health and support wildlife habitat, as referenced in Forest Stand Improvement Code 666. During high wind events, where soil, site, climate, or conditions pose a significant risk due to slope, runoff potential, rainfall, irrigation intensity, or other factors, to areas where negative impacts of nutrient cycling may occur, that any amendments that may contain undesirable plant propagules or seeds. And the next bullet, where changes to the plant community could be undesirable or unknown. For example, changing a native or an established desired community. And this is focused on rangeland settings, native rangelands where you have native establish native vegetation, and you will be applying, you're considering applying, be it compost or a biochar or any other amendment that may impact where the impact to the native plant community may be unknown or undesirable. When nutrients in the amendment will not directly be used, for example, nutrient-rich amendments, applications to fallow lands or fields without existing or planned vegetative cover. Do not apply amendments such as raw manure or biosolids. When applying soil amendments such as raw manure and biosolids, refer to NRCS Conservation Practice Standard Nutrient Management Code 590, which has considerations for raw manure and biosolids. For considerations under operations under the National Organic Problem, we just basically are mentioning on that top paragraph just to follow all program regulations and to be in compliance. The next bullet, look at we really emphasize the impact, the critical amendment components such as looking at nutrients, nutrient interactions, toxins, contaminants when planning repeat applications. We want a monitoring plan to be based on that risk. And the next statement is related to PFAS and other hydrocarbons, PAHs and PCBs. We want to evaluate the amendment as appropriate, especially if the amendment is from processed municipal waste feedstocks. So those are things to evaluate the actual amendment for. We do have report values for all parameters listed in table 1. Table 1 is listed in the standard. We do want a report on the pH, the type of feedstock, the EC, the moisture content, and heavy metals. There are thresholds from arsenic down to zinc there at the bottom. There are thresholds that that the amendment needs to fall within. Now, we do have some considerations for each of the amendments that are listed. We'll start with biochar. Use biochar that is produced by heating biomass to a temperature in excess of 350 degrees Celsius. Controlled and limited oxygen concentrations to prevent combustion. Use certified biochar seal or one that meets the criteria in table 3. As determined by the methods in the IBI standards. You want to document the origin of biochar and production method. You want to document all the parameters for all carbon amendments, table 1, and there's also parameters for biochar amendments. And then again, using state approved or certified labs for testing the amendments. And we want to use personal protective equipment. We have some specific parameters specific for biochar. We want to report the total ash, liming equivalent. We want the organic carbon range to be above 10. And thresholds for chromium is listed. We do have some parameters also, or conditions, I should say, for compost. Use compost that is produced by the controlled aerobic biological decomposition of biodegradable feedstocks. Use compost with U.S. Composting Council seal of assurance. And we want to make sure that it follows the criteria in Table 2 as determined by the test message for evaluating compost. And we want to document the origin of the compost and parameters for all carbon amendments, Table 1. And here are some of the parameters for compost amendments. And then again, we do mention using state certified laboratories. Ensuring compost is screened as necessary to remove contaminants such as glass, metal fragments, film, plastic, hard plastic, and any sharp objects. Do not apply compost when a phosphorus risk assessment indicates a high or very high risk for phosphorus transport. Consider manufactured compost products that are low in soluble phosphorus. Ensure mitigating conservation practices to prevent runoff are in place. We want to, especially if slopes that are greater than 8%, and we recommend that we do not apply soil carbon amendments on slopes greater than 15%. We want to some general considerations for all amendments. We want to add mature stable compost that will increase soil biological activity and diversify to enhance root health and promote resistance to pathogenic organisms. Apply a low hydrogen to organic carbon biochar to maximize your carbon sequestration. And I mentioned this earlier about inoculating biochar with compost tea, or manure to balance nutrients and nutrient interactions, stabilize pH, and improve amendment moisture content to aid application. And then we do mention about the Nutrient Management Code 590 is needed, which is a nutrient management plan to address nutrient-related resource concerns. And then adjusted nutrient management and pest management plans as needed for the specific amendment type and purpose. And we have some specifications on carbon to nitrogen ratios for compost. Any ratios of 30 to 1, greater than 31, can immobilize nutrients, especially nitrogen. The target carbon to nitrogen ratio for compost and other amendments is 20 to 1. Carbon nitrogen ratios below 15 to 1 are likely to mineralize nitrogen and should be used at a time when plant nitrogen demand will prevent nitrogen loss. And also it's noted that biochar with high absorptive capacity can reduce the effectiveness of some pesticides. And here are just some considerations about exhaust and emissions for the applicators, about diesel engines on your farm equipment. Consider life cycle analysis of the amendment that evaluates the feedstock source, processing and transportation impacts on carbon and greenhouse gas counting. We have some tools available to our conservation planners to estimate changes in carbon and greenhouse gas emissions of planned practices, the Comet Farm and Comet Planner tool. On cropland, soil organic carbon is related to the volume of soil disturbed, intensity of the disturbance, soil moisture content, and soil temperature at the time of disturbance. make this practice most effective at increasing soil organic carbon stocks, improving soil health, and reducing carbon loss. Perform any deep soil disturbance, such as ripping, subsoiling, or fertilizer injection, so that the vertical slot created by the implement is closed at the surface. And there's some other note about soil disturbance at a time when exposed soil carbon is less likely to be oxidized and lost. Example, when soil temperatures are below 50, or when soil is not excessively wet or excessively dry. And towards the end of the standard, we have plans and specifications. So there's a soil carbon amendment plan that must be included, which includes the purpose of the practice, the assessment of the listing of the resource concerns, and what state-approved tools were used to assess those resource concerns, your soil health lab test results, a map of your site, and your conservation management units, which would include some aerial photographs, soil survey map of the site, any soil information that was gathered of your site, so related to the physical and chemical properties of the site. And it also mentioned about the web soil survey, interpretations tab that you'll hear more about tomorrow. Plant information, including existing invasive or noxious or rare wetland plant species. And a complete amendment analysis is required in the soil carbon amendment plan. Application rate, method, timing, and method of incorporation. Finally, a monitoring plan for amendment effectiveness for the planned purpose, using appropriate monitoring activities, include a soil organic matter or soil organic carbon test to determine the effectiveness of the application for improving soil health and soil organic carbon 1 to 3 years after application. Soil testing at 3 years or more after application may monitor longer term impacts. And just some calibration information about your application equipment, inspecting and evaluating surface applied amendments after the first heavy precip event to ensure that the material is stable and does not impact non-target areas. And evaluate the effectiveness of the amendment, application, amount of cover provided, durability, and adjust future management or type of amendment to better meet the intended purpose. And you may be wondering, well, how can I see the standard? And Matt and I demonstrated earlier on navigating to your field office technical guide. The website's there on the bottom. And under section 4, practice standards and supporting documents. I just wanted to mention I have a couple of slides on just job approval authority. So it's certification granted to an individual who has demonstrated the appropriate knowledge, skill, and abilities of KSAs to plan, design, and certify installation of a given conservation practice. All of our conservation practice standards, over 160 of them, have a listed job approval authority that states develop for the conservation planners within their state. So the KSAs are competencies required for ecological sciences job approval authority to plan, design, install, and certify the conservation practice according to the requirements of the standard. So we want to make sure that the planner, the field NRCS employee has the KSAs to be able to help plan and design and install and certify the practice. And here, these are some KSAs that were developed at the national level. States may add to it. And it's basically, and states have a system of providing training to their employees on this. This is where the regional soil health specialists also within the soil health division provide support to states on the technical tools and trainings on amendment materials. And this is where partners, many partners, both federal and industry professionals like yourself, play a role in providing technical guidance. And the last couple of slides that I have is we have a national biochar agreement. Kristen Tripp will be talking about that with ARS. Well, some of the work that she's doing related to this agreement tomorrow. It's an agreement that provides training and outreach material targeted to farmers, producers, technical service providers, conservation planners, and biochar producers, manufacturers. Purpose is to educate biochar producers about the regional market, performance characteristics of biochar, and value of biochar products, and provide NRCS materials to train planners, including videos, webinars, and fact sheets to implement our EQIP practices related to including soil carbon amendment 336. And that agreement works with many partners to provide the tools and calculators for potential biochar users to help us select appropriate biochar product to meet appropriate goals, calculate appropriate amendment rates, estimate financial costs and benefits of biochar amendment, and estimate greenhouse gas and carbon sequestration benefits from biochar application. Coordinate training and outreach to biochar producers to increase the representation of commercially available biochars within the biochar atlas. And John, that is my last slide. Just we do have our non-discrimination statement, the end of our slide. I know I covered a lot there on the particulars of the standard.
You sure did. And the good news is we have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions for you. Let's see, where should I start? I think there's some confusion over the addition of biochar to manure management practices, whether or not that's something that'll be allowed. Let's say somebody wants to put it in their manure lagoon and to control odors and capture the nutrients and then compost it and apply it to their soils. How will that work for them?
Yeah, I mean, let's see, yeah, I mean, it can be used to control odors, but let's see, I mean, we do, if it's identified, the standard will pay for the application of either compost only, biochar only, or a mix of the two to meet your objectives. And the objectives need to be addressing identified resource concerns. Now, if the local planner field office identifies that situation that you just described, don't know all the details, but if there is a resource concern and that this standard can help address, then the standard supports paying for the material and the insulation.
Okay.
But yeah, And I see there was a set, that if others want to, was there a solid note that came in? I don't know if that came into me or, but if you want to have other panelists chime in on to answer some of the questions.
Yeah, and in fact,
yeah.
hey, this is everybody. Let me introduce Josiah Hunt, longtime board member for US Biochar, also producer with Pacific Biochar. He's kind of pioneering in the field of converting biomass energy plants to have biochar as output. He makes a really excellent quality product. And then next to him, you see Tom Miles. Tom Miles is the executive producer or executive director. That's not TV, Tom. The executive director of the US Biochar Initiative. He's also a board member on USBI, clearly, and he's also a board member on the IBI. He owns and operates TR Miles Consulting, specializing in wood boilers. And basically, if you have any questions about biochar in the United States, this man's probably got more knowledge than most of their team combined. We owe him a great amount of debt, and thanks for promoting biochar tirelessly in the United States, Tom. So both these folks are qualified to help answer some of these questions. So let's go ahead and dig on in. I would also encourage any of the other panelists that feel like hopping in to go ahead and do so now. I think it might just be best if we open this up as kind of a general Q&A. We'll go ahead and address some of the more pressing concerns. And Josiah, start us out.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to that last question, Michael, which I think is a really good one because it kind of opens the door to some other things. So the producer was asking, or the farmer was asking here, if they can use the biochar to help with their manure management. Can you hear me okay? Okay, if they can help with the manure management, utilizing the biochar either in the manure lagoon and or with the compost. My general thought is that through the 336 program, the focus is the soil. So if the farmer has soil that does have a resource concern, such as low organic matter, that they could use the biochar for that. And if they're using it in their manure management while on its pathway there should be no problem. I'm guessing. I think that might be how it works. Is that correct?
That sounds correct. You're using the soil carbon amendment for your soil, and the manure management can be supported by 590 nutrient management plan standard, which lists manure, compost, and other amendments focused on nutrient management. So in combination of the two standards, you can, it sounds like you can incorporate that. And since biochar can be used for that.
Yeah, and since biochar storage, if you've got large acreage, you have to get a lot of biochar landed on your site and eventually out in the field. Storing it in combination with manure and compost can actually help address some of the storage concerns, as well as if you're putting it in the early stage compost, can help improve some of the composting process and odor management and such. So it does seem like this could be a really important utilization pathway for a lot of folks. So I just want to kind of highlight that just a little bit and confirm. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we did have a question if compost tea is an allowable amendment under 336. Does anybody know if compost tea is allowable as an amendment under 336?
Oh, compost is compost is allowable.
Tea. Oh no, they're asking about compost tea. Yeah, there are a lot of high-end compost tea providers these days that
okay. I
focus on biology.
Okay, yeah, compost tea is not one of the identified amendments listed within the standard. We do encourage inoculating biochar with compost tea to meet nutrient management goals.
And Michael, I see a question here from Kabir with the USDA NRCS asking why the biochar payment in cubic yards and compost in ton per acre.
Yeah,
We did touch on that a bit earlier.
right. Let me provide some. I think it's based on what the sources. Let's see, the majority of the sources used to contract the biochar component were in cubic yards.
Okay.
And so in developing the payment rates for the FY23, the sources were in cubic yards. Now that's this, like I had mentioned earlier, that these scenarios can be evaluated. Units can be changed during the next cycle.
Okay.
That doesn't seem to be working, or there's too many challenges. But
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. I have a question I want to follow up on that somebody asked. Why a 15% slope restriction? Is it absolute? It sounds like he lives in the they live in the Appalachians, and that will rule out a lot of the pasture land there. Is that something that the local NRCS agent should be able to resolve?
on the slope.
On the slope restriction, yeah.
I think for measure there is mention from 8 to 15%, just as long as there's some measures to mitigate runoff are in place. But right now the national standard basically limits slopes beyond 15%.
Okay. Another follow-up to the manure question is, if a farmer applies biochar to their hayfield as an amendment, and then they later spray that same field with the contents of the manure pit. And I know this is kind of a variant on what Josiah asked, but would that still qualify for funding?
Well, if the amendment was, yeah, I mean, if the amendment could have been contracted, and then that was part of the plan to apply the compost or biochar in the field, that the planner would have to go to the field and certify that indeed has happened per the contract. I don't know if Matt, if you want to go into any of the kind of the contracting or the planning specs, it's basically what is done if adding manure after the amendment, if that's allowable. I think it's
I'm
that wasn't
a nutrient management specialist, but one of the in my example of the conservation plan, we did talk about using biochar in combination with the nutrient management practice, which is the one that guides the application of organic or inorganic sources of plant nutrients to the fields. I think they could be incorporated, but I think there would be some kind of expert level assistance offered to understand the influence of the biochar incorporation on the nutrient cycle. That's something I don't know about.
Okay.
So as this practice is implemented, there's obviously going to be some learning along the way. Is there a mechanism for modifying or adapting 336 as we learn more about beneficial ways of applying biochar in combination maybe with other materials?
Yeah, and if so, how do we submit that input? I agree with Tom, because I've received some direct text messages, folks that are concerned about some of the things they're hearing, and they're wondering if they're some had comments in the open comment period before it was introduced, and then others did not, and they're wondering if it's possible to help build the program so it has ultimate performance and more adoption.
Sure. Conservation practice standards are updated every 5 years, and with new technology, with everything that has been learned through the application of the first 5 years. So yes, there's definite opportunity for updates to the standard, and any updates would be open for public comment. And yeah, so in the process for that, we would be, working with your, states have a mechanism in place to communicate with the soil health division and ultimately the national discipline lead, whether it's if I'm in this position at the time or someone else, state soil health point of contacts funnel that information on basically what is working, what is not working within any soil health practices to their regional soil health specialist, which funnels that up to the national discipline lead, who's ultimately responsible for updating the standard. And it's not just one person by themselves. They develop quite a multidisciplinary team to, as what was developed to develop the standard, what was organized to develop the standard.
So there is a pathway. That's good. That's good. I'm sure you're going to have a lot. You're going to have a lot of contributions by the time this opportunity comes around. Good. Yeah. So, Josiah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a variety of questions that are kind of all around the topic of biochar produced on site. So farmers can produce compost on site and still be part of the program, from what I understand. Are producers allowed to produce biochar on site? Farmer or producer allowed to produce biochar on site and that still be part of the program? And if so, how?
Let's see.
Earlier, Alana mentioned that was allowed, and you'd have to work closely in concert with your local agent to make sure that the monitoring is in place in order to verify the amounts that were utilized. And I do think we need to touch upon the fact that, if you're using something like the Ring of Fire kiln or the big box biochar process, or even pit creation, about the fact that you're going to have to spend the money on the testing to make sure it qualifies. So it is going to have to go to the lab, and that's, what is that? It's about $400 these days, approximately. So there's some real world tests or costs associated with that. Let's see here, specific to the program, going through here. Well, there are a lot of questions in here about manure management. It's
I'd like to take an opportunity to bring up a question I've got from, we work with providing biochar to farmers that have been applying to the 808 interim practice, based here in California. And so I know it's different state by state. And so this is a question about, how some of those differences occur. In California, with our clients, there's been a lot of focus on the allowable money per acre, not based on per yard, but the allowable funds through the 808 program on a per acre basis. And that's been consistent with the multiple clients that we've spoken with. And so what you guys have presented today, and in reading the practice standard, I don't see anything that supports that. And I've also gone through, while we're looking today and looked through the field guide, the field office technical guides, and I couldn't find that specification on a per acre. So I'm wondering where you think this might come from, and how we could find more information about that.
Okay, yeah, I can. So on the payment scenarios, and Matt could fill in too. There's a typical scenario, and many of those typical scenarios are on a 1 acre basis, and there's a price of biochar and or compost that would be supported for that typical scenario. But that's for the cost of 1 acre. During the contracting phase, The unit may be the area of interest or your application. It may be 2 or 3 acres or 5 acres. Well, at the contracting phase, when you're under contract, that price is used on that 5 acres. So we're not just paying on just a 1 acre payment.
Okay,
And
I think
so
I
it's
think I
at the
understand.
contracting, it's adjusted based on what is contracted and then how many acres you have.
Okay, I think that clarified it.
We want to thank everybody for presenting today. This is the end of the official session. We are very shortly going to hop into the panel discussion with the extended Q&A for another bit. We have scheduled up to about 45 minutes, but it's entirely optional. So tomorrow on day 2, you're going to see Tom and Josiah and Kristen and a number of others that are going to hop in and be available tomorrow. Same Zoom link, same Zoom time. So we want to thank you for that. And then I believe that I have a screen here with all our socials. So I want to encourage you to follow both USBI and the USDA folks on the social media channels. So with that said, any of you going through the CEU program, if your time is now allotted for, but let's go ahead and we'll start into the extended Q&A. Okay, thanks again to Michael. That was session 4 of day 1 on the NRCS Code 336 Low Carbon Amendment. We want to thank the amazing NRCS Soil Health Division team for the deeply informative details on this practice. Michael really did give an amazing presentation today. Next up, we hop into an extended Q&A session to dig deeper into your 808 and 336 questions. It has fantastic participation by attendees and is worth clicking on the next video in the series. We want to thank our sponsors, which make programs like this possible. Please contact USBI about sponsoring future programs. Watch, like, subscribe, and then share these videos.